You get the point. It goes on for a little while longer, or a lot longer actually. So that was some raw footage that was shot of them assembling the WUNC-TV tower at in Chapel Hill, or near Chapel Hill. I think maybe Hillsborough. So anyways, that was public broadcasting back in the day. Yeah, lots of people with their shirts off, hoisting. So, pretty great. I'm Skip Elsheimer. Welcome to the AV Geeks Lunchtime Streaming Show, where we watch old 16mm films. And sometimes it's just kind of raw footage like that. Sometimes it's more pointed. This next film is more pointed. And honestly, I'm amazed I have not shown this. It's our copy is missing the title, but it's Don't Be a Sucker. And oh my gosh, this should be broadcast everywhere, all the time, because it is so important. It really is amazing. Don't be a sucker. All right, enjoy.
Run the business. All kinds of people. People from different countries with different religions, different colored skins. Free people. They can live together and work together and build America together because they're free. Free to vote, to say what they please, go to their own churches, to pick their own jobs. Yeah, Mike's got it. He's got America. But there are guys who stay up nights figuring out how to take that away from him.
I happen to know the facts. Now, friends, I'm just an average American. But I'm an American, and some of the things I see in this country of ours make my blood boil. I see people with foreign accents making all the money. I see Negroes holding jobs that belong to me and you. Now I ask you, if we allow this thing to go on, what's going to become of us real Americans?
I've heard this kind of talk before, but I never expected to hear it in America.
This fellow seems to know what he's talking about.
What's going to do about it? You'll find it right here in this little place. The truth about Negroes and foreigners. The truth about the Catholic Church.
Do you believe in that kind of talk?
That all makes pretty good sense to me.
And I tell you, friends, we'll never be able to call this country our own until it's a country without. Without what? Yeah, without what? Without Negroes. Without alien foreigners. Without Catholics. Without Freemasons. You know these people.
What's wrong with the Masons? I'm a Mason. Hey, that fellow's talking about me.
And that makes a difference, doesn't it?
These are your enemies. These are the people who are trying to take over our country. Now you know them. You know what they stand for. And it's up to you and me to fight them. Fight them and destroy them before they destroy us. Thank you.
Before he said Masons, you were ready to agree with him.
Well, yes, but he was talking about, what about those other people?
But in this country, we have no other people. We are American people, all of us.
What about you? You aren't American, are you?
I was born in Hungary, but now I am an American citizen. And I have seen what this kind of talk can do. I saw it in Berlin.
What were you doing there?
I was a professor at the university. I heard the same words we have heard today. But I was a fool then. I thought Nazis were crazy people, stupid fanatics. But unfortunately, it was not so. You see, they knew that they were not strong enough to conquer a unified country. So they split Germany into small groups. They used prejudice as a practical weapon to cripple the nation. Of course, that was not easy to do. They had to work hard to do it. You see, we human beings are not born with prejudices. Always they are made for us. Made by someone who wants something. Remember that when you hear this kind of talk. Somebody is going to get something out of it. And it isn't going to be you. This is not classroom theory. I saw it happen. I saw it first in Berlin in 1932. 5 young men that I knew were standing in the crowd listening to the Nazi speaker. Eric was a Catholic. Anton, a student of mine, was a Jew. Heinrich owned a small hardware. Karl was a farmer. And Hans was an unemployed metal worker.
To all true Aryan Germans, I say it is time you inherited the nation which rightfully belongs to you. To you alone belongs the glorious destiny of the greater Germany. The Nazi Party will provide land for the farmer, work for the worker, and profits for the small businessman. Who is getting these things now? The Jew. The Jew who has stolen our nation and our birthright. Who makes all the money and takes all our jobs? The Jew! He must be shunned. He must be ostracized. He must be eliminated. And the Catholics. We don't want our great nation run by a foreign church. We Germans will know what to do with these people when the time comes. They and their faith must be destroyed. Then there are the Freemasons. In Germany, we have no place for secret societies. There will be only one society, and that is the Nazi Party. There will be no secrecy about that in the new greater Germany.
One by one, he attacked each minority and he split them off one from the other. These men were all fellow Germans when they came here today. Now they were split into rival groups, suspicious of each other, hating each other. They were being swindled, all of them. But the man who was really being fooled was Hans. He was pure German, according to Nazi standards. To him they promised everything, and he fell for it. That's how Hans became a Superman. They gave him a uniform and they pumped up his ego. He wasn't just a little fellow out of work anymore. He was a member of the master race. Hans and thousands of others like him, all playing a sucker's game. They gambled with other people's liberty, and of course they lost their own. A nation of suckers. Hitler needed these people. There was lots of work to be done. There were trade unions to be smashed, because unions were organized and might offer resistance. There were many political parties in Germany. These the Nazis destroyed. They were determined to smash every organization where people might band together and resist them. There were Jews to be beaten and killed. The Jews were not powerful, but they were a convenient excuse for all the nation's ills. And besides, a Nazi party member could not take over this man's store. Hundreds of Catholics were put in jail because the Catholic Church had strength and could resist the Nazi drive for power. They had split the nation into 100 pieces, and then one by one, they had destroyed the pieces. Over these broken pieces, the Nazis rode into power. One party, one nation, one religion. These men had won their struggle for power. They now ruled all of Germany. But still they had trouble with their oldest and most persistent enemy, the truth. They found that truth does not die easily, and so they decided to abolish truth. One great source of truth is literature, so they burned books, 20 million of them. Many great men in Germany who were spokesmen for truth were jailed or driven from their country. Teachers, writers, scientists. Education was discouraged. In 5 years, college attendance dropped 53%. It was forbidden to listen to a British radio program or read an American newspaper. In Nazi Germany, you had to get your information from Dr. Goebbels. He knew what was best for you. The church was one force in Germany still strong enough to proclaim the truth in public. This Catholic priest was arrested the following day on charges of immorality. The Protestant church also continued to try and fight for truth. The Nazis put this man in a concentration camp. There were others who spoke for truth, and I am proud to say that educators were among them.
And what, may I ask, is an Aryan? I don't know myself. But let us see what our present so-called authorities have to say about it. They say he is tall, slender, blue-eyed, and blonde. There is no Aryan race. And more important, there is no master race. There are people who may find these ideas convenient, but science cannot support them. There is no scientific proof that there's any correlation between a man's racial characteristic and his native ability or character. In all racial groups, we find the same range of potentialities. We find idiots and geniuses. We find criminals and philanthropists. We must judge each man as an individual and not by the color of his skin or his eyes or by the length of his nose. Come in, gentlemen. Make yourselves comfortable. And remember that there is no master race. That is a scientific truth. Anyone who tells you otherwise is lying.
And so for all practical purposes, truth had been abolished in Germany. A lot of my German friends wondered what had hit them. How did it happen? Where did it start? It started right here. And this was where it could have been stopped. If those people had stood together, if they had protected each other, they could have resisted the Nazi threat. Together they would have been strong. But once they allowed themselves to be split apart, they were helpless. When that first minority lost out, everybody lost out. They made the mistake of gambling with other people's freedom. Now let's see how those bets paid off. Karl the farmer was gambling on a better life for himself. What he got was extra hours of back-breaking work, as much as 100 hours a week. He was forced to stay on his land and produce what he was told to produce, because now Hitler was preparing for war. For Heinrich, who owned a hardware store, the bet didn't pay off either. 104,000 small businesses were closed in 2 years. And for Hans, conditions hadn't improved any. He had a job now in the munitions factory, but he worked long hours for little pay. The working conditions grew increasingly bad. And even though he didn't like the job, he wasn't permitted to leave it. And when Hitler decided the time was right, Germany went to war. Not by declaring war, but by a carefully prepared sneak attack. Once again, Hitler needed Hans to do his dirty work. Hans was an expert at brutality by this time, and Hitler had decided to use Hans and his brutality against other peoples, the Czechs, the Poles, the French, the Russians. But in the crucial test of war, Hitler's race theories didn't pay off. His pure-blooded supermen were defeated by the mongrel armies he despised. By the British at El Alamein. By the Russians at Stalingrad. And then on D-Day by American soldiers of every color and religion, who smashed across the Normandy beaches and drove on through to the heart of Germany. For the misguided Germans who had swallowed the Nazi bait, the Nazi game did not pay off. The continent of Europe was strewn with millions of German bodies, pure Aryan bodies. Karl the farmer was left in the snow outside of Moscow. Heinrich stayed in Italy at Salerno. And Hans, who was going to rule the world, got only a little patch of Normandy that he could call his own. We must never let that happen to us or to our country. We must never let ourselves be divided by race or color or religion, because in this country we all belong to minority groups. I was born in Hungary. You are a Mason. These are minorities. And then you belong to other minority groups too. You are a farmer. You have blue eyes. You go to the Methodist Church. Your right to belong to these minorities is a precious thing. You have a right to be what you are and say what you think, because it's a priceless way of living. But we must work at it. We must guard everyone's liberty, or we can lose our own. If we allow any minority to lose its freedom by persecution or by prejudice, we are threatening our own freedom. And this is not simply an ideal. You see, here in America, it's not a question whether we tolerate minorities. America is minorities. And that means you and me. So let's not be suckers. We must not allow the freedom or dignity of any man to be threatened by any act or word. Let's forget about we and they, us.
Don't be a sucker. Fight fascism. It's in our midst. Now let's watch. What are we watching? Let's watch something. Let's watch the molecular weight of oxygen. Something that unites us. Enjoy.
You have previously learned that the atomic weight of oxygen is 16, and that the molecule of oxygen gas is diatomic, and therefore has a weight of 32. You've also learned that 32 grams of oxygen, the gram molecular weight, or 1 mole, occupies a volume of 22 4/10 liters at standard conditions. The purpose of the experiment today is to verify this statement that 1 mole of oxygen gas at standard conditions occupies a volume of 22 4/10 liters. Now, in order to verify this statement, we need to develop a method for measuring the weight and volume and pressure and temperature of a sample of oxygen. And if these 4 quantities are known, using the gas laws, we can calculate the weight of a sample of oxygen at any other temperature and pressure that we choose. In this test tube, we've placed a mixture of potassium chlorate and manganese dioxide. The grayish color of the material is due to the manganese dioxide. We'll determine the weight of this tube and its contents, and then heat it with the Bunsen burner. Oxygen will be produced and will be driven through this tube, which opens here, into the flask. As oxygen enters the flask, the water now in the flask will be displaced over through this tube into the beaker. By measuring the volume of the water eventually collected in the beaker, we can determine the volume of oxygen produced. By weighing the tube before and after heating, we can determine the weight of the oxygen produced. We can measure the pressure using a barometer, and we can measure the temperature of the oxygen in this vessel by measuring the temperature of the water which is driven from the vessel. And with these 4 quantities, we can proceed to calculate the weight of 22 4/10 liters of oxygen. Our first job, then, is accurately to determine the weight of this tube and its contents. Note that we don't have to determine the weight of the empty tube, because we really don't care how much potassium chlorate and manganese dioxide we've added. We simply need to determine the weight of the tube and its contents before heating, and the weight of the tube and the residue after heating. The difference in weight will be the weight of oxygen driven off. We've placed the test tube and its contents on the left-hand pan of the balance. And we've balanced the weight of the tube by adding weights to the right-hand pan, by placing a rider on the beam, and by using the chain. On the right-hand pan of the balance, we've placed 4 rather large weights. The large weight in back is a 30-gram weight. Then starting from the left in front, the weight most on the left is a 10-gram weight. The middle weight in front is a 5-gram weight, and the small weight on the right in front is a 3-gram weight. The combined total of these 4 weights is 48 grams. On the beam at the top of the balance, we've placed the rider at the 0.5 gram mark. This means that we've added 1/2 gram to the weights by means of the rider. The final adjustment is made by adding a small portion of a chain to the weights already placed in the balance. And the amount of chain added is read from this scale. These figures represent thousandths of a gram. So that we see here we've added 56.5, or 565 thousandths of a gram with the chain. And by combining all of these weights, the large weights in the pan, the rider, and the chain, we determine the weight of the tube and its contents before heating to be 48.5565 grams. First, I blew gently in this tube so that some water was forced out of the flask through this tube, which is now completely filled with water. Then I attached the test tube firmly to this stopper. And our next job is to equate the pressures inside and outside the flask. This we do by raising the small beaker until the level of the water in the small beaker is the same as the level of the water in the flask. And then opening the pinch clamp, we permit water to flow one way or the other until the pressures are equal. Then we replace the pinch clamp, remove the small beaker, replace it with the large beaker, and open the pinch clamp. A few drops of water run from the tube and then stop. This indicates that we have no leaks in our system. We will now light the Bunsen burner and heat the potassium chlorate in the test tube. We're now heating the chlorate mixture in the test tube. Oxygen is being formed here, passing through this tube. Water is being forced out of the flask and is dripping slowly into the beaker. We will continue this operation until approximately 3/4 of the water in the flask has been driven into the beaker. We've now heated the test tube until nearly all of the water has been forced from the flask and is now in the beaker. At this point, we must discontinue heating and permit the test tube and its contents to cool to room temperature, so that any expansion of the air in the tube, which occurred at the beginning of the experiment, will be counteracted by a corresponding cooling of this air after we discontinue the heating. Being careful to keep the tip of this tube under the surface of the water, we've now lowered the beaker until the level of the water in the beaker and in the flask are equal. In the meantime, the test tube is cooled to room temperature. We now know that the pressure inside the beaker is atmospheric pressure, since the level of the water inside and outside is the same. We'll now replace the pinch clamp and proceed to measure the volume of the water in the beaker. First, we will measure the temperature of the water in the beaker. We find it to be 29 degrees centigrade. Then we'll carefully pour the water in the beaker into this large graduated cylinder. We find the volume of the water to be 980 milliliters. After the tube is cooled to room temperature, we've replaced it in the balance and again determined its weight. The tube and the residue after heating now weigh 47.3848 grams. The data that we've accumulated during this experiment is now on the board. The weight of the test tube before heating was 48.5565 grams, and after heating, 47.3848 grams. The difference is 1.1717 grams and equals the weight of the oxygen produced. This oxygen displaced a volume of water equal to 980 milliliters. The temperature of this water was 29 degrees centigrade, or 302 degrees absolute, and this must also have been the temperature of the oxygen in the flask. Atmospheric pressure today is 729 millimeters. The vapor pressure of water at 29 degrees is 30 millimeters. And since the combined pressure of the oxygen and the water vapor in the flask equal atmospheric pressure, or 729, and we know that the water vapor pressure was 30, the oxygen vapor pressure must be the difference. Partial pressure of oxygen in the flask then was 699 millimeters. And we will use many of these figures in carrying out a calculation of the weight or of 22 4/10 liters of oxygen at standard conditions. First, we must calculate the volume that this oxygen would have occupied at standard conditions. We had 980 milliliters of oxygen, or 0.980 liters. We found that the pressure exerted by this oxygen was 699 millimeters of mercury. We need to correct this to 760. And we found that the temperature of this oxygen was 302 degrees absolute, and we need to correct this to 273. Carrying out this computation, we find that the corrected, or STP, volume of the oxygen is 0.815 liters. Now, we know that this oxygen weighed 1.1717 grams and occupied a volume of 0.815 liters. And we want to know how much oxygen, what weight of oxygen, would occupy a volume of 22 4/10 liters. And solving this expression for x, we find that x equals 32.2 grams. Now this compares with our accepted value of 32 grams of oxygen quite well. Our error then is some 0.2 of a gram. Percentage-wise, our error is 0.2 times 100 over 32, or 0.6%, 0.6%. It's possible then, using this method, to calculate rather accurately the molecular weight of oxygen.
Yes, I am very envious of that microphone that he had, kind of right there, kind of mounted to his chest, like kind of cool. I mean, think about like little tiny mics now, the little lavaliers. We've advanced so far in mic technology. All right, so I have a film here. It's called Conflagration, and it's one of those great setting up for a disaster films, in that we get to see what happens to lead up to the disaster, and of course that disaster involves fire. So enjoy.
Of Boston, across the Mystic River next to the Navy Yard. Block after block of tin-clad wooden structures filled with rags, paper, scrap metal, and open storage areas piled high with rubber tires. The population has large concentrations of ethnic groups from Europe and Puerto Ricans speaking Spanish only. On Saturday, October 13th, 1973, weatherman Bruce Schwegler predicted a change in the weather.
It was a warm and sunny day across New England. Very warm for this October day. 77 degrees a high in Boston. Warm and humid air streaming northward along the Atlantic coastline. But it's going to change. The frontal system is located in New York State. That front is coming our way, and behind it, cool, dry, and very windy weather prevails. Winds up to 50, 60 miles per hour across the Great Lakes. These winds will be moving into Massachusetts tomorrow, and that means we're going to have a very windy, dry day. And with the dry conditions prevailing in forests and in cities, be very careful of all outdoor fires.
On Sunday, the residents of Chelsea did what they usually do on Sunday. Some relaxed in the sun or took a walk. Got married or attended a social gathering. Then at 3:56 p.m., something ignited salvage goods in a wood frame warehouse, and the euphoria of a Sunday afternoon turned into hell.
Chelsea Box 215, Arlington and 3rd Street. Chelsea Box 215, Arlington and 3rd Street.
Chelsea Fire Department dispatched the usual first alarm response of 3 engine companies, 1 ladder company, and a deputy chief. At 3:59 p.m., the fire crossed Summer Street. Deputy Chief Coyne had been out on patrol in the area because of wires felled by high winds and a number of brush fires. He arrived at 4:01 p.m. and ordered a 2nd alarm. Before it was sounded, he ordered a 3rd alarm. 40-mile-per-hour winds fanned the fire. At 4:03 p.m., Chief Herbert Fothergill arrived.
Well, I'm answering C1.
On orders of C1, strike the 4th alarm.
Message received, C1. On orders of the Chief, you want a 4th alarm in Box 215.
By 4:04 p.m., 5 communities had alerted 10 engine companies to assist Chelsea. Heavy streams, mainly from deck guns fed by large-diameter hose, were used from the start. Additional companies responding to the multiple alarms began to arrive. However, the fire was extending faster than companies could get into operation, spreading through outdoor piles of tires and other combustibles in wood frame buildings. Realizing the situation, Chief Fothergill sent the first declaration of a conflagration by radio in U.S. history.
Notify Newton Control immediately. Notify them that Chelsea has a full-fledged conflagration. Full-fledged conflagration.
Chelsea to Newton Control.
Answering Chelsea.
Newton, Chief of the Department reports Box 215 is now a conflagration.
Chelsea, Chief has struck the 5th alarm and reports it is now a conflagration. District 13, Chelsea is now a conflagration.
With the fire completely out of control and spreading rapidly, Chief Fothergill telephoned to fire districts north and south for additional help, while the dispatcher at Newton Fire District 13 Control Center also summoned mutual aid assistance.
Sudbury, you please send engine 1 to Chelsea. This is Newton Control.
The response to calls for assistance was terrific. The century-old New England tradition of mutual aid immediately rose to the challenge. An army of 700 firefighters from 69 communities responded with 190 units of various types of firefighting apparatus. They converged on Chelsea from all directions: Woburn, Amesbury, Averill, Watertown, Marlborough, and dozens more. Volunteers side by side with regulars. On and on they came, bearing the proud names of New England towns born in colonial days. They rallied in Chelsea and placed themselves under command of Chief Fothergill, according to custom. The Chelsea Chief Dispatcher marshaled the reinforcements in a parking lot, pending Chief Fothergill's instructions.
Yeah, Revere. You take your pump and you're down to the Williams School and assist Boston 26. Lay a line to them, help them fight that fire on the roof of the Williams School.
Some of the apparatus arrived via the Tobin Bridge, which connects Boston and Chelsea, and which had been closed for repairs. The Massport Authority reopened it to let emergency vehicles through on a traffic-free route. The Chelsea Police Department was busy evacuating residents from the fire area. Sergeant Andy Mullen drove through the streets broadcasting in English and Spanish over a loudspeaker, urging the people to evacuate their homes.
Es muy importante para todas las personas viviendo aquí en esta calle, sale la casa ahora.
When notified of the extent of the fire, Mayor Philip Spellman hurried to police headquarters, established his control center there, and conferred with Police Chief Abraham Bergen.
Hey, we want to keep polluters on Broadway. We want to make sure that nobody breaks into this.
We've got registry men in here, and they'll be out on that because it'll keep them busy on Broadway, too.
Now, Mike and I just want to go all over the city with Sergeant Duggan. The only place we're weak is in Broadway.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Frank Willett, State Agency for Civil Defense.
Hi, Frank.
Can I be of assistance?
What I need right away is 400 cots, blankets, and 2 mobile kitchens. I got to get them down to the Army right away. They're bringing those people down there from the fire area. You got no ways of putting them up, Abe, you know, so that's stuff we need right away.
The Mayor of Chelsea has requested 400 cots, 800 blankets, 400 pillowcases. He also wants 2 mobile kitchens to set up a refugee center. And he wants them sent to the Armory on Seaver Street, if you get that. Have them report to Harry Patty. He'll be there at the refugee center at the Armory.
But that was Mayor White of Boston, and he's going to send us 25 cars and 50 police officers with dogs. And they're men from the tactical police force, so I think we'll be in very good shape with them.
Okay, have Sergeant Duggan and Sergeant Groom put them right out in the street, Abe, you know, especially on Broadway and around the City Hall.
Yeah.
That's our only bad spot. Now, you mentioned earlier about the National Guard. Charlie Diorio is going to take care of the National Guard. He's trying to reach the governor right now, and Charlie will get back to us as soon as he can. We've got to get some more help in here. We can't keep up with what we've got, Abe, you know?
That's right.
Chief Fothergill tried to walk from point to point, but the area was so large and the fire was developing so fast that he could not exercise control that way. This was remedied by the state police, providing a helicopter and flying the chief above Chelsea to give him an overview.
Bring as quiet as possible over towards 5th and Arlington.
The Massachusetts National Guard provided another helicopter, and Mayor Spellman flew over the stricken area with Police Chief Bergen. From the air, the chief could detect spot fires and direct companies to them by radio. With his aerial survey completed, Mayor Spellman issued orders to block off every major road leading into Chelsea.
We can stop the flow of traffic in from Boston if we shut off those 2 bridges, and then we don't have to worry about that end of the state.
The state police gave major support to the closing of the access roads. Station WBZ broadcast an appeal.
Our regular program is being interrupted at this time here on WBZ for a special announcement. Due to the extremely dangerous fire in progress in Chelsea, the mayor of Chelsea has requested that sightseers stay away from all roads leading into that city. All access roads have been blocked off. Only fire, police, National Guard, and ambulance vehicles will be admitted into Chelsea. I repeat, please stay away from all roads leading into Chelsea.
Police from many surrounding communities, including hundreds of off-duty Boston police, arrived within a short time to assist the Chelsea police. The Massachusetts Civil Defense Agency activated its Emergency Operations Center and sent sector coordinators hurrying to Chelsea to assist in the organizing of the relief effort. Harry Pardee worked at the Chelsea National Guard Armory. Other civil defense coordinators were stationed at City Hall, police headquarters, and Chelsea Naval Hospital. The armory was used as a shelter for evacuees, with cots and food provided. "500 troops of the Massachusetts National Guard had just completed a 26-mile hike for charity when the fire broke out. Returning from the march, the troops immediately went on patrol duty in the stricken area to seal it off and prevent looting. By 6 p.m., the conflagration had increased to such intensity that it developed into what Chelsea firemen described as a firestorm. The intense heat of the fire created its own convection column. Winds at ground level blew towards the fire at such speeds that men found it difficult to walk. Items as heavy as shutters and 2x6 boards flew about. Flaming trash was carried by winds to adjacent buildings, which they ignited. Flaming brands were drawn up in a thermal column above the fire, then deposited up to a half-mile downwind. The wind bent the fire and sent it under spaces beneath buildings like a blowtorch. Thus, thousands of square feet of property were being preheated. At times, there were walls of fire 100 feet wide and 80 feet high in the air. The fire was moving faster than people could run. This phenomenon approximated the fire condition which could be expected in a nuclear attack, assuming that a blast wave did not greatly alter the combustible structures. The water supply was critical. Hand lines were too small to be effective. There was not enough water available to supply master streams. Broken pipes in damaged buildings stole the water pressure. Firemen had to use a relay system in which several hoses are connected to reach the fire area from an operational hydrant. In some cases, hose lines were laid as far as 3,200 feet. Water pressure was maintained by pumping from one engine to a second to a third. At 7:30 p.m., police achieved control of the spectators. By 8 p.m., 20% of the city of Chelsea had been consumed by fire. Chief Fothergill, facing the most massive urban fire that any American fire chief has encountered in the last 50 years, fought the conflagration like a general fighting a major battle. He used certain fire companies to fight a delaying action, while he established defense positions at strategic locations beyond which he determined not to retreat. To do this, he held his reserves, furnished by mutual aid assistance, and did not commit them to the battle until the proper time. The defensive lines were dictated by locations where there was space wide enough for a fire break. To the north, a defense was established along railroad tracks, with a roadbed wide enough for fire break purposes. In the easterly direction, the firefighters were successful in stopping the advance of the flames at Arlington Street, which is a wide artery with reduced building fire potential and vacant lots. With the wind velocity reaching 100 miles per hour at times, the tactics used consisted of preventive action rather than an attempt to extinguish the fire. The plan was to slow down the fire and wet down unaffected buildings to reduce the preheating caused by heat intensity. This saved the Williams School. The firefighters turned their backs to the inferno and played streams of water on the school. Another tactic was to apply as much water as possible at a high point to knock down sparks or brands which would have been blown up to a residential area on a nearby hill. By 9:15 p.m., the main fire was contained as the wind abated. While the firemen fought heroically, Mayor Spellman organized the people of Chelsea behind the scenes to aid the fire victims. The mayor moved his command post from police headquarters to City Hall.
And the Knights of Columbus are going to take care of that, all right? Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Sears Roebuck, shoes are coming from Sears Roebuck.
All right, Sears Roebuck, send the shoes right down to Major Haltine down to Salvation Army.
A truck of groceries will be going to the armory.
Okay. Now, if those are emergency supplies, have them taken care of at the Army. If they're not, if they're canned goods and that, right down to Major Haltine.
An impromptu hotline operation was established in the mayor's outer office in City Hall by the Reverend Larry French of Horace Memorial Baptist Church, who was appointed disaster coordinator by Mayor Spellman.
Send them downtown to any of the stores, we'll pick up the bill, okay? We have an agreement. Everything has to go to the Salvation Army. Bring nothing here if they won't take it to the Horace Memorial Baptist Church. Nothing here, not people or clothing.
Reverend French, there is a man who has a 3-room apartment in Quincy. He's
All right.
wondering if...
Get his phone number, phone it right into the Williams School, immediately.
Truck at Newton from the city of Boston broke down. May I send them Ken's truck and have Ernie drive it?
All right.
Disaster relief services? Yes.
I have a latest transfer.
I got a pump coming in, and I want it to send right up to Chelsea Memorial Hospital. And when it gets up there, we get a low water pressure on the hill. Right? So send that pump right up there. Now, there's a National Guard mobile water vehicle coming in with 1,000-gallon tanks. Let that stay up there, too. There's also some ambulances coming in from out of town, Winthrop, Boston.
Then disaster struck again. Ignited by wind-borne sparks and brands, fire broke out on the roof of City Hall.
Mayor, between your staff, I'll have to evacuate the building. The fire is raging also.
With City Hall now on fire, Mayor Spellman was forced to move his operations back to police headquarters. Even though the slate roof of City Hall was considered almost fireproof, fire did break out under the eaves and had to be fought in the smoke-filled attic. One of the heroes of this episode was Deputy Fire Chief Edward Roach of Chelsea, who was overcome by smoke and had to be rushed to a hospital. The roof of City Hall had to be opened to allow flames to be drawn to a point where they could be controlled. Brockton Fire Chief Edward Burrell led the attack on the fire on the roof. Deputy Chief Capistran took over command of the operations at City Hall. There were many heroes that night. Fuel supplies were becoming critical. Some pumpers had come so far, they needed fuel on arrival. Fire companies that had been operating for several hours also needed refueling. Fuel had to be transferred from tank trucks and storage tanks to 5-gallon cans and transported by truck to apparatus at the fire. With flaming brands and sparks flying through the air, the job of refueling was extremely hazardous. Charlie Gabarino, the mechanic of the Chelsea Fire Department, was one of those who performed this job with courage and dedication. On through the night, the brave Army of New England firemen fought the conflagration. Additional companies were still needed to relieve exhausted crews and broken down apparatus. When dawn came, the smoking ruins of Chelsea resembled war-ravaged cities of Europe. Firemen were needed to extinguish smoldering areas for 4 days. While the fire was still burning, local and state government and various relief organizations rushed to help the desperate plight of Chelsea residents made homeless or unemployed, and those whose businesses were destroyed. The Salvation Army established a food and clothing center in a church on the very edge of the devastated area. A Red Cross Disaster Services truck toured the streets of Chelsea with a loudspeaker advising the Spanish-speaking fire refugees of the National Guard Armory for assistance.
Todas aquellas víctimas que fueron afectadas por el fuego deben de reportarse a las oficinas del fuerte de la Guardia Nacional. Allí les atenderán los oficiales de la Cruz Roja.
Governor Sargent was on the scene and immediately ordered the state resources to provide relief for Chelsea.
The Department of Public Welfare is now moving checks out to people, and we're trying to, on an emergency basis, now take care of people through the Department of Commerce that is working with the industry and the industrialists who lost their properties. The Department of Communities and Affairs are working in connection with housing. MHFA, the Massachusetts Housing and Finance Agency, has some buildings available for relocation. But I think we really have two problems here. One is the emergency matter of taking care of people and providing water at the hospital. The other is the long-range aspect, and I've been discussing this with the mayor. There's a redevelopment project that we feel can be moved along. It's very close to approval by the city. I have the state agencies ready to move forward on this.
Have you heard from the federal government at all regarding emergency assistance?
Well, I've indicated to the president that this clearly was an emergency, and we needed a disaster declaration.
Bernard Judge and Mel Rich, officials of the Massachusetts Civil Defense Agency, met in Chelsea with local and federal officials. There, they accomplished necessary fact-finding and coordination needed for the governor's formal request to the president for a disaster declaration. The governor signed the letter request Monday afternoon. The presidential disaster declaration for Chelsea was announced by the Federal Disaster Assistance Administration Tuesday afternoon, less than 48 hours from the time the fire started, establishing a national record for a disaster declaration. The following morning, Wednesday, a one-stop disaster assistance center was established at the Williams School under the direction of the Federal Disaster Assistance Administration.
Será su esposa será bien, no se preocupar.
The FDAA coordinator of the center was assisted by Carl Salone and other staff members of the Massachusetts Civil Defense Agency and Reverend Larry French, disaster coordinator for Mayor Spellman. Thus, all three levels of government were united in the effort to provide immediate relief to the distressed people. In addition to making 1,000 people homeless, the fire put 600 out of work, but not for long. The Chelsea Chamber of Commerce contacted a number of industries, and the response was wonderful. Industry reacted with numerous job offerings. The State Division of Employment Security set up a job bank of opportunities in the area.
I see you've applied for a position here as a machine operator.
Yes, sir.
All right, Mr. Roser, I see by your application that you can handle a forklift. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, I can.
How long have you driven a forklift?
The all-out signal was sounded on Thursday, 4 days after the first alarm. The last fireman left the devastated area. 18 city blocks had been consumed. Chelsea had survived a terrifying conflagration without a single fatality. Grateful for this miracle, the dazed city struggled to capture some semblance of normality again. It was a time for retrospection. They knew the cause. Salvage yards, a concentration of closely built wood-frame tenement sections, an inadequate water supply. Couple the ingredients for an inferno with certain conducive weather conditions, a spark for ignition, and a conflagration is inevitable. Realizing that it could happen again, as it could happen in a number of other cities, Chelsea vowed to push ahead on an urban renewal project, an industrial park which will eliminate the potential for a massive fire. The people knew what caused the conflagration. They also knew what saved them. The hundreds of firemen provided by mutual aid assistance, a form of civil preparedness, a tradition of the New England firefighter.
Hey, look who it is. It's Katrina.
Hi, everybody.
She's back.
I'm back.
She was out of town for a whole week. And in the meantime, we moved a bunch of stuff. And we're moving more stuff today, thanks to Miles.
Miles!
And we're also setting up for the Wifflefist event. So, yeah. If you're in the Raleigh area this weekend, Friday, tomorrow, from 5 until, I can't remember 9, we'll be having an opening reception about the Wifflefist Collective, where there will be refreshments, and there will be kind of a visual history of Wifflefist. Then Saturday, starting at 6:37, we'll have actual performances, including a band that I was in called the Beatles, with an extra S.
Which I, just for the record, have never seen.
Yeah,
the
so
Beatles.
if you want to see Katrina get mortified, I'll be there doing that. And then Sunday there will be kind of just a general, like, you get to go by, and it will probably be the least attended. If you're afraid of people, you can go and just kind of see what happened. This is all stuff that happened in the 90s, from like 92 to 99. And this is where AV Geeks came from. Like, ultimately, because of things that we did, AV Geeks kind of came out of this. And it's one of the... There's still some Wifflefist projects that still exist in some aspect, but AV Geeks is one of the big ones. So anyhow, Lump Gallery, downtown Raleigh. If you need information, give us a holler.
So June 23rd, 24th, 25th?
No, June 21st, 22nd, 23rd.
2024.
Yeah, that's tomorrow, Saturday, and Sunday. All right, I'll have more information about it tomorrow. In the meantime, everybody have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much for contributing with your comments. Don't be a sucker.
Bye.
Enjoy.